2 years ago, I made a video reviewing the Alternative Influence Network, which was a report on the idea that YouTube's algorithm was encouraging right-wing radicalization. I wasn't impressed.
Simply, if you're allowed to pick the nodes you want, omit the nodes you want, add vertices that don't exist, and omit vertices that do exist, you can make a graph that shows anything you like. The data underlying this graph is complete nonsense, and even a cursory spot check would reveal that.
Recently, I noticed Bret Weinstein, a college professor famous for being exiled from campus by a mob of left-wing ideologues, complaining on Twitter about a new paper written on a similar topic. Naturally, I thought to myself, yes, my opportunity to earn another 100 YouTube views has arrived. This new paper, titled Algorithmic Extremism, Examining YouTube's Rabbit Hole of Radicalization, is much better than the AIN report. This paper actually tries to be objective and quantitative. It still has some serious problems, though. The paper gets data from Nielsen Market Research. Essentially, Nielsen pays people money in exchange for their data. In this case, Nielsen gets the browsing histories of a representative sample of 300,000 Americans and lets the researchers for this paper analyze those browsing histories. The researchers wanted to test the hypothesis that YouTube's recommendation algorithm is driving people towards right-wing extremism. Researchers had 3 possible tests that they thought would detect right-wing influence from YouTube. Test number 1 is the idea that there's more right-wing YouTube content than non-YouTube content in the browsing history. So if someone is browsing Breitbart.com and Ann Coulter's website and then watching right-wing YouTube videos, probably YouTube's algorithm is not responsible for the right-wing YouTube videos. On the other hand, if all of your off-YouTube web traffic is knitting forums, and on YouTube you're constantly watching the likes of Stefan Molyneux or the Golden One, well, maybe YouTube is pushing you towards that content. Number 2 is the arrival on right-wing videos and where it comes from. So if users tend to arrive on right-wing videos from other YouTube videos, as opposed to arriving there from other third-party websites, that's evidence YouTube is pushing viewers towards right-wing videos. And then the third test is when users watch multiple YouTube videos in a session, does the likelihood of any one of those videos being a right-wing video increase over time? If all of the videos are equally likely to be right-wing, maybe that's because the user is just picking from their own preferences. On the other hand, if the likelihood of a YouTube video being right-wing goes up over time, that's possibly caused by YouTube preferentially pushing people towards right-wing YouTube videos. So those are the three tests, and what the researchers found will shock you. But you'll have to wait to hear what it is until after we talk to our sponsors. No, not really. The researchers found no evidence. They said, quote, while the far-right echo chamber is somewhat smaller than the left and centrist communities, it is rapidly growing in population size and watch time. And a little later, they said, at the same time, we find little evidence that the YouTube algorithm is responsible for these trends. End quote. Researchers also came up with the frankly mind-blowing conclusion that, quote, it is plausible to think of YouTube as one of many libraries of content, albeit an especially large and prominent one, to which search engines and other websites can direct their users. End quote. The methods, analysis, and conclusion of this paper all seem pretty reasonable, if unsurprising. So why was Bret Weinstein mad, and why did I say that there are serious problems with the paper? Good question. It has to do with how the authors put YouTubers into buckets and who they called right-wing. For example, Bret Weinstein is mad because they called him right-wing, and he doesn't identify that way at all. Reviewing the list of YouTubers, you can see that the authors have made some debatable calls. For example, they named the YouTube channel The Progressive Voice, an explicitly left-wing YouTube channel, as far-right. In her About page, YouTuber Shoe on Head says of herself, quote, I do comedic social commentary on things such as pop feminism, LGBT issues, weird internet subcultures, and women's media from a left libertarian point of view, end quote. You guessed it. According to the authors of this paper, that's classic far-right YouTube. They also name YouTube channels like Sam Harris or Joe Rogan as being far-right. Most of the YouTubers on this list are correctly labeled, in my opinion. But a minority of those are labeled incorrectly. And that's actually a big problem because the YouTubers that are labeled incorrectly are actually pretty big YouTubers. Sam Harris is a center-left philosopher and neuroscientist, and he has a channel with 500,000 subscribers. Shoe on Head, the pop feminist left libertarian, 1.5 million subscribers. And oh yeah, Joe Rogan, one of the biggest podcasts in the world, who supported Bernie Sanders, he likes Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang. Joe Rogan has 10 million subscribers, and the paper mislabeled him. And they also include multiple Joe Rogan Clips channels in the far-right bucket. The paper probably labeled most of the channels correctly, but counting by video views, the paper may have labeled most of the video views incorrectly. So why did they label all these channels incorrectly? Basically, they took a set of labeled channels from a different paper. These channels were labeled with 19 different tags, ranging from social justice or libertarian right to things like anti-white or conspiracy. The researchers then bucketed those 19 labels into one of 5 different buckets: far left, left, center, right, and far right. For some of those tags, it's pretty obvious what to do. A right libertarian label probably does belong in the far right or right bucket, but other tags are actually somewhat orthogonal to political alignment. For example, you could be a left-leaning conspiracist or a right-leaning conspiracist. You could be a left-leaning member of the intellectual dark web or a right one, but all of these labels would get sorted into the same bucket, far right. The anti-white label, if you're wondering, got sorted to far left. The overzealous and expansive definition of far right results in a situation where there are far more nominally far-right channels in the analysis than channels of any other political alignment. So what does all this mean? I don't know. The method seems pretty good, but their conclusion relies on analysis of the data, and the data itself is terribly flawed. That means we can probably disregard their findings entirely because the paper is built on foundations of sand. It also means that we can enjoy a smug chuckle at these scientists who wasted a lot of their time on analysis while forgetting to check the labeled data that they copied from another paper. I suspect if this analysis were done well and fairly and with properly labeled data, that what they'd actually find is that YouTube is recommending people against right-wing YouTube videos. But that's just my intuition, and in order to bear that out, we'd need real data and a good analysis. Thanks for your time. Don't forget to like and subscribe.